Would you accept a job with strange rules that could have dangerous consequences if not followed? I did. And what happened in that cafe still haunts me every time I close my eyes. I originally shared this story on Reddit some time ago, and now I've decided to tell it here in my own voice, just as I lived it, because some secrets can't stay hidden. If stories like this hook you the way living them hooked me, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. You'll want to be ready for what's coming. It all started in 2017. I was 20 years old, broke, and willing to take almost any job just to stop depending on my parents. One day, I saw a flyer taped to a bus stop. Cafe hiring, night shifts, daily pay. It sounded perfect. The address wasn't far from my house, so I went that same night. The cafe looked normal. One of those 24/7 places. Empty tables, warm lighting, the stale smell of old coffee. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until I met the owner, a woman in her 50s, serious but kind. She asked me a few basic questions and, without much fuss, said, "If you're willing to start tonight, I need you to follow these instructions to the letter." She handed me a piece of paper, a list of rules. Very specific rules. At first, I thought they were just standard instructions. Clean up, serve customers, check the coffee machine. But no, the rules felt like something out of a poorly written horror movie. I read the page once. I laughed. Then I read it again and felt a strange chill in my chest. Here were the instructions. 1. Never look at the cafe's clocks. Ever. If you need to know the time, use your phone or your own watch. Why? Are they broken? Or do they show something you're not supposed to see? 2. Take the trash out before 10 p.m., not a minute later. The word before was underlined 3 times. 3. At 10:20 p.m., a white trailer will pass by. If you see only one, you're fine. If 2 pass by, lock everything and hide in the bathroom until 11 o'clock. 4. From 11:50 p.m. to 12:10 a.m., turn off all the lights, get under the counter, and stay silent. No matter what you hear. 5. If an old woman with a black cane comes in and asks for tea without sugar, don't speak to her. Don't look at her. Just place the cup on the table closest to the exit. She'll leave on her own. 6. If there's a power outage between 2 o'clock and 2:20 a.m. and you hear footsteps near the kitchen, hide in the storage room. Don't come out until the lights return. 7. If a little girl walks in holding hands with a couple dressed in white, close the place immediately and leave through the back door, no matter what they say. 8. If at any point you hear someone knocking and claiming to be your family, don't open, no matter how much they sound like them. It's not them. 9. At 4 a.m., if a black trailer stops and a customer wearing gray gloves steps out, serve whatever he asks for and stay chatting with him until 5 o'clock. Do not interrupt the conversation, no matter what happens outside. 10. After 5 a.m., everything goes back to normal. Close the place at 6 o'clock like nothing happened. Signed at the bottom in blue ink. Follow these rules and you'll be fine. I didn't know if they were messing with me or if I had just accepted the most dangerous job of my life. That first night, I arrived 10 minutes early. I had my phone with an alarm set, my headphones, and a thermos of coffee. Like any other bored guy on a night shift, I took the trash out before 10 p.m., just like Rule 2 said. I glanced at the cafe's clocks, but didn't dare look too long. Something in my gut whispered, "Don't push your luck." At 10:20, I sat by the window, curious. A white trailer drove past the cafe, right on time. Just one. I laughed to myself. This is ridiculous. It has to be some hazing prank for new hires, I thought. But then at 11:49, the lights began to flicker, and as they flickered, a cold shiver ran down my spine. I remembered Rule 4. Turn off the lights and hide from 11:50 to 12:10, but I brushed it off. I thought it was just another scare tactic. So I stayed at my spot with the light still on. That's when an old man appeared at the door. He wasn't a regular customer. His stare was cold, almost empty, and the slow, deliberate way he walked chilled me to the bone. I tried to ignore him, but suddenly, with a wild and violent motion, he slammed the table and started yelling incomprehensible words. Without thinking, I ran to the bathroom and locked myself inside, trembling. I could hear his footsteps outside, getting closer and closer, until suddenly, everything went silent. The figure was gone. After that terrifying moment, I tried to calm down and reminded myself that there were still more rules to follow. Rule number 5 was clear. Do not engage with the old woman who might appear. When I finally saw her, a frail elderly woman with a piercing stare and slow movements, my instinct was to approach her, but I held back. I stayed still, looked away, and ignored her completely. To my surprise, her face twisted into something between anger and frustration, as if she had wanted to make me do something. But after a few minutes, she simply turned around and left, just as the instructions had said. That moment left me even more unsettled, and I knew for sure now, this was no ordinary job, and there were still many rules left to discover. The night dragged on. At exactly 2 a.m., just like Rule 6 had warned, the power went out. Everything went quiet, and then I heard it. Soft, uneven footsteps inside the cafe. They weren't mine. I hid behind the counter, holding my breath. The sound got closer, a dragging noise, like someone walking barefoot across wet floor. I wanted to peek, but something told me that if I did, I wouldn't live to tell the story. So I waited still until 2:20, when the lights came back on and the sound stopped. Still shaking, I forced myself to keep going. I started counting the minutes until dawn. But then the front door opened. A little girl came in, alone. She sat down, and seconds later, they appeared, a male and a female figure. They weren't her parents. They weren't people. My skin crawled. Rule 7 was crystal clear. Close the cafe immediately. I rushed, pulled down the metal shutter without saying a word, and turned off the lights. From inside, I watched them. They just stood there, motionless, like they were waiting for me to change my mind. After a few minutes, they vanished. Only then did I dare to breathe again. I was barely recovering when someone started banging on the back door. I heard my mother's voice, or so I thought. She was calling my name, begging me to let her in. Said something terrible had happened. Then it was my sister's voice. Then my father's. But I lived with them. They were home. Rule 8. If your family knocks on the door, don't answer. So I didn't. I put on my headphones and focused on the time. But their voices grew more desperate, until they turned into a distorted shriek. They banged on the door until I heard it creak, and then, just like that, silence. At exactly 4 a.m., a trailer parked in front of the cafe. I heard the engine shut off. The driver came in. He didn't say a word. He was tall, expressionless, dressed like he had stepped out of another decade. He stared at me and asked for a coffee. I remembered Rule 9. If a trailer arrives at 4 a.m. and the driver asks for something unusual, serve it and talk to him until 5 o'clock. I stood my ground. I made the coffee. I handed it to him. He asked me to sit with him. And then he started talking about things I had never told anyone. Secrets from my childhood. Thoughts I had never spoken aloud. He said them calmly, like he was just commenting on the weather. Time moved slowly. Every minute in front of that man felt like an eternity. At exactly 5 a.m., he stood up, left the empty cup, gave me a faint smile, the only human expression he ever showed, and walked out without another word. The final rule said, after 5 a.m., everything goes back to normal. Close at 6 o'clock. I didn't move until the clock hit exactly 6 a.m. Then I locked everything up, stepped outside, and felt the cold morning air on my face like I was breathing for the first time. I wondered if what I had lived through was real or just a very elaborate nightmare. But then I checked the sheet of rules they had given me, and I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A stain, red as if someone had pressed a bloody finger onto the page. And you know what the worst part is? Despite everything, I went back for the next shift. Because sometimes, fear is easier to bear than hunger. After that night, I kept working a few more weeks. Every shift was a test. A challenge between what was real and what was impossible. Some nights were quiet. Others felt like they came straight out of hell. But I kept going, because the pay was good, and because somehow I felt trapped. Until one day we just didn't open. I arrived at 11 p.m. like always, but the doors were locked with a padlock. There was a handwritten sign on the glass. Closed until further notice. Thank you for everything. I tried calling the owner. The number no longer existed. I went around back, to the alley empty. I asked the neighbors. No one knew anything. The cafe had simply vanished, as if it had never existed. That was my last attempt to go back. Since then, I threw out the sheet with the rules, but I still remember every single one. And sometimes, when it's 11:50 at night, I turn off all the lights, just in case.